You are listening to Megan is Not a Parent, But. This episode is brought to you by Positive Parenting Class Pass, which are 6 simple positive parenting classes to kickstart your positive parenting journey. You can start today at bekindcoaching.com/classpass. In today's episode, we will be chatting about the flight trauma response, what it looks like, what it feels like, and we're going to explore it again in adaptive and maladaptive ways. This is the next step in this series, this grouping of episodes. So I invite you to get cozy, grab your notebook, and let's dig in. Welcome to Megan is Not a Parent, But, the podcast where I, your host, Megan Ford, former early childhood educator turned positive parenting coach, helps parents just like you learn how to deal with your strong-willed child's difficult behavior. I've been described from my clients as a blend between Brene Brown and Miss Frizzle, you know, the one from the Magic School Bus. I help bring awareness and hold space for the hard conversations and make big concepts like behavior and relationships and temperaments easy to understand and easy to implement. If you're a parent who struggles with your child's loud, dramatic, disruptive, over-the-top behavior, but don't think a parenting coach would help you because those are just for the bad parents or those parents, then this episode is especially for you. I invite you to grab a journal, a cozy blanket, a warm beverage, and enjoy what you're about to explore. Before we really get started, I really want to start off with this disclaimer that I am a parenting coach, and this information is for education and entertainment. It is not a substitution for professional mental health support. All right, we are going to begin here again that we are perfectly designed to survive. We are beings that are designed to survive, and our brain is finely tuned to make sure that that is its main focus. When we find a threat, we start to protect ourselves so that we can start to make assumptions that fill in the gaps. Our brains will fill in those gaps. So we know just in the slightest little clue of it that we're like, whoop, there it is. There's the threat. And we ping up our threat responses. These are responses that are adaptive in nature. It's our brain doing its job. It's adaptive in nature, but left unchecked, left unpruned, left unexplored, those strategies that protect us can become maladaptive, meaning that when we're out in the wild and we start to see things that clue in or feel like or give a resemblance to that initial threat, it can ping up the same threat. I like to use the visualization of seeing a tiger versus a kitty cat, and how sometimes when there's certain details blocked, we can interpret it to be the exact same experience. And then that experience pings up those threats. So when our brain is perceiving those threats, right, when we're perceiving that, it activates our defense response. That means that we are working in alignment. We see the threat, it initiates the defense. So this is why I say I help parents remove fear-based punishments. Punishments inflict pain. Pain initiates that defense. Fear-based punishments elicit defense. We start to work in resistance to, in resistance to the very thing that we're trying to avoid. Meaning when we yell at someone, it pings up defense. We then become the threat when we see the threat. Then we're locked in stress responses versus working towards connection. And in those moments, if we are in a true threat, it would make sense. Those defenses are adaptive. And again, they become maladaptive when we perceive the threat that's not there. So we've been working through this chart of how the nervous system responds to trauma, adapted from Ruth Lanus. And we first went through talking through it. We identified last episode all about the fight response. And this episode, we're digging into flight, the running away. So it's that first question, can I escape? If it is a yes, we go right to flight, we escape. If we go to no, if we cannot escape, then we go into can I overpower? Yes, we go to fight. No, we go down to will it lose interest? Yes, we go to freeze. No, we go right on down to fawn. We're working our way through this. This is starting to piece together different pieces of this puzzle. So when our brain is stressed, when when our brain is activated, when we're shifted, when we flip our lid, then we're responding from our lower brain asking, am I safe? And if the answer is no, or if our brain is perceiving the answer as no, we will stay there. And when we're talking about nonverbal cues, there are nonverbal behaviors that can clue us into someone else's experience. So if we look at the physiological stress responses, that is noticing pupils dilate to take in more light. Our hearing becomes almost supersonic, becomes very focused. Our heart beats faster. We begin mouth breathing. This was important when I was a teacher to notice which kids, when they were doing their work, became mouth breathers, start breathing through their mouth. That it gave me a clue like, something else is going on here. It also can start to connect why when we feel sick and stuffy and we have allergies or we have a cold and our nose is stuffy and we start breathing through our mouth, why we may feel more irritable. Because when our brain is interpreting like mouth breathing as like, whoop, kick on those defenses. This is a refresher in that all of those lower spaces, it's happening not in your control. It's happening automatically. So things too, like our muscles tense. I was just speaking to a video I saw on TikTok of a community member, Stephanie, going through a stressful routine switch with her daughter. And I noticed her hands. I said, I could notice that you were in a regulated state, even though you were still experiencing stress. I could tell just by the way that you were carrying her, that your body was relaxed. You were going through it, but you weren't bracing yourself. I could tell by her body language, her hands. Now, she may have said, yeah, that was really hard. I don't enjoy doing it, but I could tell by her body that she was de-escalating herself in it. She was becoming a safe person. She said during a morning ritual that she said, I know the difference between picking her up in love and picking her up in anger. And I was like, yes, your body communicates that. Another thing is your stomach flutters, your digestion stops, your mind races, your pain perception is reduced. Your pain perception is reduced because you're in survival. If you were processing pain when you were fleeing a threat, it would override. It would become, that would be a liability. So our pain perception is reduced so that we can survive in it. And the stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline pump, they become activated that initiate all of these responses. So last episode, season 5, episode 14, we dug into the fight response. And today we're going to dig into the flight, the running away, the fleeing. Fight and flight are often some of the two most apparent before we shift into freeze. But fight and flight can happen simultaneously and can happen very quickly. So flight types, someone who kicks into flight, they start to protect themselves from threats through escape, right? That first question is, can I escape? When we are in the presence of a threat, a real threat, this serves us. It serves us from fleeing from the threat. It gets us out of dodge. It helps us avoid it. Think about when you're driving and the person in front of you kicks on their brakes and abruptly, and you either swerve into the next lane or you go off into the shoulder. That's your flight response. You're so quickly deciding, I can flee from this threat and I'm going to go to where I can flee. We've interpreted threat and we flight. We go around it. It's adaptive. Also, it's adaptive because we're constantly on the move. It helps us stay moving. I think about this in watching my husband play Fortnite, the video game where I'm sure you're familiar with it, or maybe you've watched it. And whenever there is a battle between two people, they just start jumping around everywhere. And it was like such a funny thing to witness. At first, I was like, what are they doing? And then I was like, oh, they're flight. They're like hopping around, staying on the move, because then it makes it harder for them to be a target, right? Think about when you're playing tag or you're playing hide and go seek. And the goal is to always stay on the move so that it makes you harder to catch. That's our flight response. And it's, again, operating in adaptive ways when the goal is to flee the threat. It also helps us stay on alert. We are almost hyper vigilant. We're scanning and we're constantly ready to like bolt. In maladaptive times, this can have maladaptive impacts as well. So all of those adaptive processes then can shift in, if we're not in the presence of a real threat, become maladaptive in ways of difficulty relaxing. If we are in a flight, if we are on, like, if we're interpreting a threat and we are looking up for ways to get away from the threat, we're trying to escape it, it's really hard to relax. Think about going out to dinner in a restaurant or any sort of big family gathering, like a birthday party or a Thanksgiving, and you're trying to wrangle the toddler into the seat next to you, and they're having a hard time relaxing. And what do we say? We say, "Can you calm down, please? Can you take some deep breaths?" It's hard for them because they are interpreting like so many things are going on. It's overwhelming. They're trying to like get out of Dodge. It can also become maladaptive when we interpret that threat and it sends up panic. I think about this is going to be, the example I'm going to use is bugs. But think about when you turn on the light and you see the roaches scatter, right? They're like panicked. They're like, "Oh, we're awake." And then they scatter, right? And again, it's adaptive when there's that threat, but when you hear footsteps, maybe your partner, maybe your kids, when you have footsteps coming in behind you and you start to feel that panic, that's cluing you in that maybe it's becoming maladaptive. Or maybe when things start to happen, like you avoid showing up, right? You've made plans, you've said yes, you've agreed to something, and then it's, we start to avoid doing it because we're feeling stress, we're feeling that interpretation of threat. And so we're protecting ourselves, we're surviving through that threat. Brain break moment. All right, I know that I can go deep way fast. So let's just take a pause here to take a deep breath in and let it out. And listen while I let you know that this episode is brought to you by me, Megan, and my Positive Parenting Class Pass. Positive Parenting Class Pass are 6 simple positive parenting classes to kickstart your positive parenting journey. Those classes include Positive Parenting 101, which is a class that is just designed to give you the first steps in what positive parenting is and what it is not. Second class is Emotional Validation. In this class, we dig into how can we show up to have your child feel seen and heard in their lived experience. The third class is Setting Boundaries, all about communicating, enforcing, and allowing testing of your secure and consistent and firm boundaries. The fourth class is a class called Ending Entitlement. Inside of this class, we dig into how we are showing up using tools of entitlement and how we can start to release those tools and begin practicing tools of empowerment and choice. And we know that what we put down, they're going to pick up. The fifth class is a class all about natural consequences. This is a class that gets very clear and you'll walk away knowing what an imposed consequence is, what a logical consequence is, and most importantly, how to begin utilizing natural consequences so your children begin learning from their lived experience. And the final class is a class all about apologizing. I like to say that connection is the most skipped over step and recovery is the least utilized step. So in that step, you'll start to learn how to show up and use impactful and effective apologies so that your child knows that you see them and hear them and care about them. If you are looking to begin your journey today, then I highly encourage you go to bekindcoaching.com/classpass and dig into the classes starting today. As my free gift, you will receive Raising Respectful Kids, which is my 3-part video series all about how to stop focusing on adding on more decorations to your child and to you and to your relationship, and instead starting to reinforce and build a solid and secure foundation together. I can't wait to hear all of your amazing wins from the steps that you take inside of Positive Parenting Class Pass. All right, ready to get back to our episode? Before we get back, let's take one more deep breath together. And take a deep breath in and let it out. And let's go. This can also show up in our behaviors. So if we're noticing, right, behaviors are communication, we're breaking these down and say, hey, I can observe in front of me someone in a stress response, someone who is activated into their lower brain, someone who is activated into interpreting threat. And in the flight response, this is what it looks like. It looks like someone who is easily overwhelmed. It looks like someone who you're talking to them and they have zoned out. They are, nope, overwhelmed. Maybe they say things like, can you write that down for me? Or, yeah. And then they start like dropping the ball on things. Tends because they are interpreting the threat in front of them. This is also someone who micromanages. They are constantly on the move, constantly making sure that all the loose ends are tied up, constantly fluttering around, making sure that everything is taken care of. This is someone who leaves difficult situations. When there is a hint of conflict, they're like, bye. They're like, exit the chat, right? And sometimes we can interpret that, like we see that behavior and we can interpret that as rude or dismissive, or we can interpret that as like, oh, they are interpreting a threat. This is hard. They're feeling stress right now. This can also be someone who withdraws and avoids, someone who's like, oh, that's too hard, so I just won't do it anymore. I'll just avoid doing it. I talked about this recently in the Facebook community with my little note card about the flame, right? We interpret that flame as bad and then we stop doing those things. And it's our way of regulating and managing the flame, the anger, the stress, the threat, until we realize that we are doing that to things that we value and we want to enjoy, right? That's where it goes from being adaptive to maladaptive. You can observe a flight response also in quick and erratic movements. Someone who is constantly distracted, like they cannot sit still. They cannot just focus, right? It's not because they don't want to. It's not because they can't or they're incapable of. It might mean, hey, something else is going on. They're not doing this to be annoying. They're not doing this to be a nuisance. They're not doing this to be a distraction. They're doing this as a way to help regulate themselves in it, to help protect themselves. This is also someone who is startled easily. And ooh, I'm sure you've experienced that. For me, I think I've done it actually on the podcast, where it's like a little, and that's my startle reflex happening. It's something that's outside of my control. I remember when I used to be in the bathroom and I would be doing my hair and Jason would come up right behind me and I would get startled. And then he would take it personally, right? He would get upset. He was like, I'm just coming in. And I'm like, I know you're just coming in, but I'm the person who's startled. We had to really work on that as a couple, for him not to take it personally and to understand that it's not something I'm doing because I don't want him to be there, or I don't want him to come say hi, or I don't want to talk to him. It is an automatic response. So even just this morning, I was in the shower when he was leaving for school, and he came in, he lowered his tone of voice, he spoke softly, and he goes, hey again, just letting you know that I'm here. And I was like, oh, hey. And I was able to like poke my head out, give him a kiss before he left. And I was like, thank you for not just like coming in all hot and loaded. There it is. This may also be someone who is switching subjects. Like they just quick, anytime they get into a difficult situation or a topic comes up that they don't like, they'll just switch the subject. You're like talking to someone about your hard day and they're like, yeah, but did you see the news? Yeah, but the weather is great. But someone who just then switches the subject. It's something they're saying with their behavior. Hey, I'm uncomfortable right now. This doesn't feel safe to me. I'm interpreting this conversation or this conflict as a threat, and I'm just going to avoid it. They may also be running away. They may have a desire to escape. Again, they're unfocused. They have difficulty paying attention. They may be hyperactive or fidgeting a lot, or procrastination, or on the opposite side of procrastination, like the other side of the coin is perfection, or moving away, just this general moving away and avoiding from something that feels like a threat. Something is coming up and it is overriding their system. they are overloaded, and then they pull away from it because they are interpreting that threat. We can probably see it in our coworkers. We can see it in TV shows that you're watching. You could probably witness it in some aspects with your children, your partner, yourself. And I want you to know again that they are not giving you, when someone is displaying these behaviors, they are not giving you a hard time. They are not doing this to you, right? We don't need to take their behavior personally, but we can now start to interpret it differently. And we can start to say like, hey, this is an alarm going off. They are having a hard time. And in these moments, this is our time to do our part, for us to be able to stay present within ourselves, put on our air masks, stay present, attune, communicate in ways that resonate, and helps build trust. And failure to do this, and the failure to do your part, ruptures the trust. It makes it very hard. We then become the threat, or they become the threat to us. So instead of becoming gasoline in those situations, right? Someone's on fire and we can act like gasoline, or we can act as an extinguisher. Instead of acting like gasoline, which is like quick movements, adding pressure to them, loud vocals, adding punishments, shame, blame, like things like trying to get them to admit, using threats, or saying promises that you cannot keep. Instead of doing those actions as someone who is outside the situation, we can now show up to be an extinguisher. We can now start to show up to connect and create safety. If someone is displaying those behaviors, they're saying, woo, I do not feel safe. So that can tell us, okay, my goal is not the thing, but it's to create safety. Let's regulate our nervous system. Let's do that process. Let's lean in to connection work. How can I validate? How can I show up to be present? How can I attune? How can I show up to speak and connect to you and say, I see you, I hear you, you are valid, your experience is valid. It is not the same as agreeing. It is not the same as condoning. It is not saying I would have the exact same situation as you, or I would respond in that exact same way. That's not it. It's saying, I see you, I hear you, I understand this experience for you. We can then again begin to practice these power with strategies, getting on the same page, building agreements, building child-led routines, getting on the same page together, using these moments as an opportunity to practice patience, to build social emotional skills, and then to begin to say, hey, this is outside of me. I'm starting to act more like gasoline. I am here to ask for help and support, because perhaps I am triggered into a threat response in this dynamic. And just getting outside supports, outside tools, outside resources to help support you so that you can show up in ways that are helpful for you and your child. That's what this whole thing is about. That is the flight response. Building on this, fight is, that knee-jerk, we protect through conflict. This is about fleeing from the conflict. And next week, we're going to be talking about freezing and following up with fawning. So in closing, I want to pose these same questions, the same questions from last week. We're going to pose them at the end of each of these sessions. Let's consider, when do you notice the signs of stress in you and in others? When can you begin practicing noticing them? Like I said, books and TV shows are really great ways, because especially in books, because the author is so descriptive. The next, when do you notice signs of safety? Like I said, I could see it in the TikTok video I watched. I could check in and read body language to notice the signs of safety. And then what habits support your sense of safety, and what habits support your sense of stress? Where are those moments in our life that we're acting as gasoline versus acting as extinguishers to ourselves? One of my favorite things about this is starting to see how you are implementing and practicing this work. And I would love to see it in action. I love seeing the actions you take from implementing and taking action in this work. And nothing fills me up more. So if you've taken notes or have any thoughts and takeaways, I want to know it. I want to see it. Please share it with me. And there are several ways to share. You can leave a review on Apple Podcasts. You can share your thoughts and takeaways on social media and tag me. And you can share your thoughts inside our dedicated posts inside of our Facebook community, Positive Parenting with Megan Ford. I want to thank you. If you're listening now, I want to thank you for tuning in and staying up until the end. My mission in life is to help parents feel supported and empowered in doing this work. This podcast, my Facebook community, my programs, and book club all help parents work through the phases of awareness, education, and practice. It is not easy work, but I am here to help make it easier. And if you are ready to dig into the next step, I invite you to check out the connection class called Emotional Validation inside of ClassPass. This class will help you balance your parenting toolbox by helping you connect to your child in a way that helps them feel safe, seen, and heard. You can start today at bekindcoaching.com/ClassPass. And as my free gift to you, you will receive Raising Respectful Kids totally for free. Friends, thank you for being here, and I cannot wait to see you next week. Bye, friends.